So in the last session we were talking about different ways of allocating our overheads, direct labour hours and machine hours, and getting very different results with no clear solution as to which is the better method. Well, we don't have an answer to that, so let's simply move on and think about how a company can uh, start to manage its fixed overheads. And one way is, one start is to divide the overheads into various departments, into the departments within which they are incurred, and for that we have an allocation process to work out how much rent and rates should the machine department have. Well, that could be on the basis of area. How much electricity should the finishing department be allocated, or heating and lighting, shall we say. Again, I suppose we could look at area there. Canteen costs, how should they be allocated? Well, maybe on the basis of the number of employees each department has. So a department is an identifiable unit in an organization, and that seems like a good place to start for trying to divide up our overheads and try to make it a smaller problem. So, reasons for dividing into departments: size and complexity of our costs, expertise. Dividing a business into departments. Well, yes, okay, size and complexity, expertise, and accountability, simply to manage a unit. I think that's reasonably straightforward. So back to our costing process. A typical job, in this case job A, passing through Autosparkle Limited's process, where they are, I don't know what, finishing cars, something like that. So preparation department for job A then goes to paint shop and then goes to finishing department. So some sort of machine process. We don't have to worry too much about it. First of all, the direct costs. They can be identified with the activity in the department. So that is reasonably straightforward. And then I was talking on the previous slide about sharing out our fixed costs between the departments on some sort of a basis. Number of employees, the floor space, that sort of thing. So a share of the preparation department's overhead, so we assume that we've allocated our overheads to the three departments here, and then each job that goes through the department is going to pick up a certain amount of overheads to add to it. And we talked about this before with the labour hours in a garage, having to pick up overheads and have the overheads allocated. So we saw this here with direct labour hours and machine hours. As the job goes through, it uses up so many labour hours and it gets charged a rate per hour. Same with machine hours, it uses so many machine hours and then again a rate per hour. But there's no sort of economic rationale for the allocation, but we want a number in there to represent fixed costs. How we use that? Well, we have to use it with caution, I guess. So the preparation department picks up its share of overheads on whatever basis we choose for charging out those overheads, which could be material hours or direct labour hours. Then the paint shop department, a share of the paint shop department's costs, overhead costs, goes to job A on the basis of whatever basis is chosen there. And then the finishing department, again those overheads are allocated out to the finishing department, so that as it travels through, it picks up these costs, and then it goes to the job itself goes to the customer. But in financial terms, we've managed to charge out our fixed cost to the job to get something that is called the full cost of the job. But we must be very careful here. It's not a direct cost, it's not an actual cost of the job, because some of these costs have simply been allocated to the job without being directly caused. And we do this for reasons of control and to a certain extent decision making. We want to ensure that the revenue we charge, the price we charge, is sufficient to cover the full costs, and this is an approximate way of doing it. Number of cost centers in a business, according to a survey, the Survey Kings, Drury and Tales. So percentage of businesses, presumably this adds up to 100, does it? Yeah, looks if it does. So 14% had only 1 to 5 cost centers, 36% had 20 or more cost centers. So well, I think we can be happy that cost centers are quite a big feature of UK businesses and businesses around the world. A cost center we haven't really defined is that here the paint shop, a department, tends to be a cost center. Not necessarily, there may be more than one cost center in a particular department, depending, might be different types of finishing, etc., and each could be a cost center. But in our case, we've been looking at departments as essentially being cost centers. So some businesses with a lot of cost centers, and the majority, over 50%, have got more than 11. So we've been looking at job costing, where there's a particular job, sale making, in an earlier video. And then there's batch costing. Batch costing is where you make a certain number of a product, 100 teapots in one go, and put it all in the oven and bake it all and do them 100 at a time, and each unit of 100 is a batch, so you make it up that way. So full cost of a batch delivered on a job costing basis, so a batch going through the company a bit like this, but a batch of 100 units. So the full cost of the job divided by the number of cost units in a batch. We were saying 100 teapots, so divided by 100 equals the full cost of one cost of the unit. Here's an example: £1,000 as our full cost, 500 units, £2 per unit. Okay, so what it is could be any product that is manufactured in batches. And so we've got this basic allocation per unit, but we've got to work out the full cost first, and then as the units go through the process, so they pick up a cost per unit, and that is this process here, picking it up as it goes through, according to what? According to the basis, machine hours and labour hours so far, and we have to choose one basis. Now in traditional times we had direct labour intensive and labour paced production. It went at the pace at which people worked, not at the pace of machines, which tends to be the case these days. We had a low level of indirect costs relative to direct costs. That's our fixed costs, our indirect costs, and we saw that on the break-even chart. We looked at low costs. And, well, markets were competitive actually. It's looking at the past and saying, oh, in the good old days there was no competition is not true, but let's live with that myth. So, costing was mainly to measure labour productivity because labour was the important factor. Allocation didn't greatly matter because cost, fixed cost wasn't a big part of your total cost. So the price based on total cost in an uncompetitive market was not greatly challenged. If businesses would say, well, that's the full cost, and therefore that's the price you pay, it became a sort of accepted way of pricing a product, and the government accepted this as a way of pricing projects. So, famous Bloodhound missile project on a cost plus basis. The price agreed was the full cost plus a percentage. And of course, the costs got out of control because the more costs that you could allocate to this project, the higher the price, because it was cost plus. And that was really one of the problems of taking costs and accepting what is an allocated cost as being an actual cost. It isn't. You can fiddle it. You can allocate costs, as we saw when we looked here. You can choose a basis so that a particular job does pick up a lot of fixed costs, or you can do it the other way around, allocate so that a cost doesn't pick up a lot. So it's there's no certainty to this. There's no economic rationale. It is an approximate process. Right, okay, let's the new environment, the new world, as it were, the brave new world. Capital intensive machine-based production, yep. High level of indirect costs relative to direct costs, yep. Highly competitive international market. And as we saw, volume is everything. And if to get volume, you may have to go for big discounts. So, that is the problem when we're allocating fixed costs. And the risk of a loss, as we saw in chapter 7, is much greater with high fixed costs. And those are the diagrams from that chapter, showing that in a high cost world, which is this one, your risk of a loss is much greater than if your variable costs decline along with falling sales. Here your costs do not decline with falling sales because there's a high fixed element. Okay, so in the next session we will talk about activity-based costing as being one of the attempts to allocate fixed costs to products in a high-tech environment.